Thank you for joining us today. We hope you had a fantastic week and we are excited to worship together. So get your Bibles ready and enjoy the service.
Well, hey, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, wherever you're watching. We are continuing in our series called The Game of Life, and today's sermon is entitled, Play Well with Others. There are always those people that just don't play well with others, right? I think that was one of the little marks you could get on a report card when you were in like grade school, does not play well with others. And some people just don't do well at spending time with other people and being in relationship with other people, playing well with others. There are people that you don't want to play games with, right? They're just bad losers. They're bad winners. They don't know how to interact and work as a team. They just kind of make it not very fun. I always like the dynamics of team sports. And one of the reasons I like that is because in a team sport, there doesn't matter how good you are if you can't play the sport with other people, if you can't work with your team. In a team sport, you can only rise to a certain level on your own ability. You also have to be good at playing with the team if you want to rise to the highest levels. There's always the aspect of chemistry and working together and understanding that you have strengths and other people have strengths and utilizing those strengths together in order for the team to do the very best. I don't know, believe it or not, I don't know if you're aware of this. I was not aware until this week. There is a Monopoly tournament every year, big, huge Monopoly tournament with actually pretty large cash prizes for the winners. And the guy who actually started this Monopoly tournament is affectionately referred to by the people that participate as Mr. Monopoly. And Mr. Monopoly wrote a little book on Monopoly and how to be good at the game and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that he said that the number one reason that people do well at Monopoly, believe it or not, it wasn't knowing what places to purchase, what has the highest return. It wasn't knowing when to purchase. It wasn't even getting the right rolls. He said the number one way that people do the very best in Monopoly is by being the kind of player that other players want to sit next to. And what he said was that Monopoly is a game of trading. If you can't make good trades, you can't win. And if you are arrogant and you rub people the wrong way and you're the kind of person they don't want to lose to, they will purposely push you out where you cannot do trades, versus if you're the kind of person that people don't mind losing to because you are kind of a blessing to them in some way, shape, or form, then you'll succeed and do better. So even a game like Monopoly, where it's not a team thing in any way, shape, or form, where the whole purpose really is to beat every single person, still the best way to succeed at it is by being someone who can play well with others. But playing well with others isn't always easy, is it? In fact, playing well with others is hard. Playing well with others is a really hard thing to do. It's not the most natural thing for most of us. Quite frankly, for most of us, it's just easier to do things by ourselves. It's easier to do it ourselves. It's easier to try to just figure out and keep moving forward without including other people. Playing well with others requires relationship. And real relationships are extremely hard. Real relationships require sacrifice. They require learning to submit. They require forgiveness. They require communication. They require acts of mercy and grace. They require just giving things up. They require compromise. Real relationship is very hard. And so as a result, oftentimes what we do is we seek to just kind of be more isolated. We seek to do things more on our own. Playing well with others, one of the reasons it's so hard is it requires more focus on our attitude and less focus on our knowledge. Playing well with others requires more focus on our attitude and less focus on our knowledge. See, we live in a world where we just like to learn as much as we can so that we can be able to accomplish as much as we can on our own and not have to rely on others. But to work with others, to be in relationship with others, we have to have the right kind of attitudes. We have to live life in a way that makes us be the kind of player that people want to sit next to, makes us be the kind of person that people want to work with. You know, there was a shift in the modern church in the 19th century that we kind of shifted to a place where knowledge became king in the church. This idea even that our relationship with Jesus was focused on knowledge, that a disciple was someone who knew more about Jesus, knew more about faith, knew more about doctrines, had the right doctrines, right? And that's what made someone a good Christian. They having all the right knowledge, that our salvation literally was even based on the right knowledge. But that's really not scriptural. That's not what we see in the Bible. In the Bible, we see that knowledge is good. It's good for us to learn about Jesus, to learn about the doctrines and those kinds of things, only because they help in giving us the right attitude. They change us. Knowledge is only good if it changes us. Being right is not always worth the fight. And yet, we look at the modern church, and so often the modern church is kind of divided and broken up because people are more worried about being right than taking on the attitude of Christ, what Christ calls us to do. And you add that with the fact that we live in a culture and a society that pretty much has taught us that we can be an island. We can be isolated. Where independence is one of our highest goals. You throw all those things in, and it's really easy for us to get confused about why we even go to church and what the church is about and what our attitudes as Christians should be. But you see, I'm convinced that one of the biggest purposes of the church in the modern age in America is to help us practice the art of submission. For us just to learn what it means to submit to one another. Because you think about everything in our life, everything in our culture, everything about it nowadays is to train us that we don't need to submit to anyone. That we can handle everything on our own. We can do everything our way. That if someone gets in our way, we can eliminate them from our life. If someone opposes us too much, if they call us to compromise too much, we can just eliminate that person. I believe the church is one of the key places where we are called to learn that isn't the attitude Christ has us to have. Paul says in Philippians 2, chapter 2, verse 3, he says, do nothing out of selfish ambition, but in humility consider others more significant than yourself. And you see, that's what Christ calls us to. Paul calls us elsewhere to have the attitude of Christ. We should take on the attitude of Christ. We are to have an attitude of humility, an attitude that considers others better than ourselves. And I truly believe that the church is one of the last places where we can even practice that in our culture. And Jesus is more concerned about our attitude than our knowledge. And yet we live in a culture where we're kind of being told that, no, as long as you know the right things, you're going to be okay in this life. As long as you know the right things about Jesus, you're going to go to heaven. But we don't see that from the Bible. And now we live in a culture that has even pushed isolation even more. And now we have people even more who are saying, well, you know what? I don't really feel like I need the church to practice my faith. I don't need to be a part of a church body to practice my faith. I can live my faith out with just me and God. It's just between me and Jesus. But nowhere in Scripture do we see that. The Bible tells us over and over and over again that we are to be with one another. We're to love one another, encourage one another, uplift one another. We're to worship with one another. We're to grow with one another. The Bible tells us that we need each other. And more than ever before, I believe we need each other to learn how to live considering others better than ourselves. Jesus was so concerned about our attitudes that, in fact, his very first teaching was about attitudes. The very first teaching that Jesus gave was about attitudes. We find it in Matthew chapter 5, verse 1 through 12 in the Beatitudes. Let's go ahead and look at this. It says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountains, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and he taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Well, I just want to spend the remainder of our time looking at these words of Jesus. So let's just jump back up to verse 1 there and look at what Jesus says, what happens here. Jesus is gathering his disciples for the very first time. Probably not as big a crowd as he oftentimes spoke to, because he's just now gathering them. He's called a few specific people. They've told their friends, and there's been a few people that have heard rumbling, so they've kind of come out. This is a kind of a common thing to go hear teachers anyway. So people have come out, but probably not nearly the thousands that Jesus had spoken to at other times, probably a few hundred. But the very first thing he wants to get across is their attitude. Think about that. You know, Jesus' first message could have been, hey, here's the things that you need to know to make sure you follow me. Here's all the right things about me and my Father and all the things that it's going to mean to be a Christian. He could have said that. He could have said, hey, here's all the sins that you need to avoid. He didn't do that. He said, I'm going to talk to you about the attitudes that you're supposed to take on, the kind of heart that you need to have. And it says this, it says he opened his mouth and he taught them. And he said, blessed. Now that word blessed that he uses is the word makarios. It's reserved for the highest blessing. It's actually a blessing that would only be given to kings or even to talk about gods. And he says, that's the kind of blessing you have. You have that kind of blessing, makarios, when you live out this way. Now, some like paraphrase versions of the Bible will use the word happiness here. They'll say happy is the person, not blessed. But I want to make sure we understand. I think that's very misleading, because happiness is not a blessing. Happiness is based on our happenings. It's based on circumstances. But the blessing is based on living out the attitude in life that God intends. It's not based on our circumstances. It's based on how we live out our circumstances. But Jesus says blessed. And what does he say? He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Now, that word poor is actually the word, I always get this wrong, phulchos. And that actually means someone who is literally the poorest of the poor. The widow, the orphan, the person who has nothing. And Jesus is saying, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, because they will, I'm sorry, will you go back to the verse? Thank you. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. See, he's saying, when you realize that you have nothing left other than God, that's a blessing in life. Because you're no longer clinging to the things that other people cling on to. Now, does he say you have to be that poor to have it? No, it's that spirit. It's a spirit that realizes all I have is God to cling to. Then he says, blessed are those who mourn. You know, it says when Jesus saw the crowds at times, and he saw the oppression, and he saw the sin in the world, that he wept over it. He cried. Jesus mourned. He mourned for the condition of the world. He mourned for the condition of hearts. Jesus says that when we have that attitude, that heart, that we mourn for the condition of the hearts of people, and we mourn for the condition of our own heart, that we're blessed in that. When we mourn because we realize we are truly wrong, that we have truly sinned, there's a blessing in coming to that place of realizing that we have sinned. Verse 5, he says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. That word there is protros, which is basically saying humility. That blessed are those who are the most humble. Blessed are those who don't act on instinct, who don't act on desire, but they act out of a place of humility. And he says that they'll inherit the earth because of their meekness. He says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I love that blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, right? That person who realizes that they're never full of righteousness. They've never had their fill, right? No matter how good they might be or how much good they might see, others might see them, they realize that they constantly have a need for righteousness, right? There's a difference between, if you've ever been to a buffet, right? Like if I'm going to go to a buffet, I know I'm going. Like I don't just end up at a buffet, right? I plan on it. And so when I plan on like a good buffet or an awesome meal that I know I'm going to have, I purposely won't eat for hours. So I'm really hungry. I'm like, I get to that place where, man, I got to eat. I need to eat. I'm really hungry for this, right? But there's a difference between that first trip up to the buffet and you're like, oh, I was hungry. But then at that time you're like, I've had enough, but that looked really good. I'm going to go back and have that. Now, there's a difference. Something might be really good and I think, oh, I kind of want that. I desire it, but I don't have to have it. Jesus is saying we as Christ followers, we should have the attitude that is hunger for it, to hunger for righteousness. To say that I have to have it. I have to have more of God's righteousness in me. No matter how good I am, I can't look at others and say, oh, look at me, I'm righteous. I constantly see a need for more of it in my life. There's no contentment in how righteous I am. There's no getting to a place and kind of going, I feel like I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good when I compare myself to other people. Then he says, blessed are those who are merciful, for they shall receive mercy. James says that we'll receive mercy as we give it out. And that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. He says, we're going to see mercy in our lives as we are merciful people. It's amazing. You ever give mercy to someone who doesn't deserve it? To see the attitude that changes in their heart and their life? When they don't deserve something and you give them mercy? And how it changes their whole countenance. If we are the kind of people that show mercy to others, it comes back to us. And he says, blessed are those who are pure in heart. You ever know someone who just kind of seems pure in heart? You don't question their motives. You just sense that, man, they're just seeking to do the best they can for everybody. We're just supposed to desire to have a pure of heart. And to be pure of heart. I'm sorry, the way I said that was kind of weird. Right? To have that attitude of like, I have no hidden agenda here. I'm not looking for my gain. right? I'm considering you better than myself. I'm just simply here to bless you. And Jesus says, when we are called to be pure of heart, and then we are pure of heart, that we shall see God. And then he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be the sons of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. Now, peacemaker is a little bit different the way Jesus is talking about as the way a lot of people live life. A lot of people live life seeking peace. They're just constantly seeking peace, meaning like, I just don't want any stress in my life. I just don't want any conflict. And they will do everything they can to avoid conflict. And so as a result, they never have peace. Because you know what happens when you avoid conflict? You can't be in relationship with people. If you avoid conflict, every single relationship you ever have will eventually have a barrier between it. And eventually probably fall off. You have to be able to confront things to have peace. So when people are just constantly like, oh, no conflict, please, no conflict, all you're really doing is creating more conflict in your heart. Because now you know that there's an issue between you and a person, and you're not dealing with it. So you're going to bed with that anxiety in your heart, and you're never going to have peace. But the peacemaker is the person who actually pursues the situation and says, hey, I sense that there's an issue between us. Can we talk that through? Because your relationship is so important to me that I want to continue that relationship. And I want us to have peace. That doesn't mean we're not going to fight. Doesn't mean we're not going to have issues. Doesn't mean we're not going to have conflict. That's all relationships, right? But Jesus says we need to be peacemakers. And I love the way he ends this. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. I love it because you know what he's saying? I think a lot of people think, well, if I live the life God calls me to, then my life will be easier. No, he's saying, hey, live that way. No promises that it's easier. It's actually, you're going to be persecuted. People are going to take advantage of you. People are going to go against you when you live out the attitudes that I call you to live out. And yet, you need to know that there's blessing in that. Life is not going to just be easy because we live that out. And yet, Jesus promises us that we are blessed. Why go through all these? Well, one, obviously, each of us has probably one or two of these areas where we can kind of go, man, right now I just sense that's an attitude in my heart that I need to work on, I need to focus on. But even more than that, I want us to consider that as a church, that now more than ever is the time that we need one another in order to practice these attitudes. See, I believe now more than ever, we need the discipline of being committed to the church body in order to combat a society that tells us that we don't need others, that we can live our life by ourselves, that we can live our faith out by ourselves. We need a place, we need a group of people where we can actively and consistently practice putting on the attitudes of Christ: forgiveness, mercy, patience, love. Because this world is constantly telling us it's okay to be more and more isolated, but that is not the call that Christ has for us. If we can't practice these kind of attitudes with one another, how can we ever live them out outside of the context of the church? How can we live them out in the world? The growth that we seek in this life is most clearly displayed by how we live it out with others. And in the church is one of the best places for us to do that. You know, we live in a culture that says, you know, when someone is too much of a problem, to get them out of your life, to push them away. When someone isn't living up to what your standards are, to just no longer deal with them. Quite frankly, we're living in a culture that says we should even do that in our own marriages. But the church is constantly calling us to say, no, you need relationship. It's reminding us the way God built us. And I know people who say, well, I just don't want to practice my faith within the confines of a church. I don't want to be in the confines of a church body. I feel like that just limits the way I express my faith and that kind of thing. Well, first of all, anytime I've heard someone say anything like that, my first challenge is, show me how you are consistently practicing self-sacrifice in your life. Because I think we think we're practicing self-sacrifice more than we are. But show me how you're consistent. Where are you consistently giving to? Where are you consistently sacrificing your time to? Who are you consistently coming alongside and loving that needs extra doses of love? But secondly, if we want to be in relationship of any kind, it requires living within the confines. We're always constricted anytime we come into any kind of relationship. Guess what? I am in the confines of my marriage because I committed to my wife. I've confined myself that I only have the kind of relationship I have with her. I don't have it with any other woman on this earth. Even my kids, when I had kids, I made the decision that there were going to be little people that I brought into this world that I was going to love a little different than I loved any other people, right? Friends, every single time you bring a friend into your life, you're making a decision to work within the confines of that relationship. That person's going to have attitudes and personality things and that you're going to have to sacrifice for and give it a little bit. You also can only have so many close relationships. All of us have a capacity for that. So we're saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to choose to have enough of a relationship with you. I'm going to exclude other people. I can't be that way with everyone. We're always confining ourselves if we're going to seek relationship, and the church calls us to relationship. Life is about living in relationship. God put two yearnings in our heart. The first is for him, that we constantly seek him. But the second is to be known and to know others. And the church is one of the best places, I believe the best place, for us to put that into practice.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Oh. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Oh, you never stop. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. Before you go, I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to download the Church Center app. On that app, you can watch past sermons, you can connect with us, you can turn in your prayer requests, register for events, and give. Also, I want to remind you, if you're interested in giving to MVF Church, not only can you give on the Church Center app, but we have 2 giving boxes, one located at the back of the sanctuary and one in the kitchen as well. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot.